Next on Max TV, we take a look at Ortiz Medina, we review Chigaya of Klitschko, and we have news and notes. Coming up on the next round. And welcome to the next round. Steve Kim joined as always by Gabriel Montoya, a jam-packed show. We begin round number one from the Staples Center in Los Angeles. What was supposed to be a doubleheader is now in jeopardy. The WBA featherweight title tilt between Chris John and Rocky Juarez has been postponed as Chris John is pulled out due to some blood deficiencies. The main event still stands. Junior welterweights in action. Victor Ortiz at 24-1-1 takes on the rough, tough Marcos Medina with a record of 25-1. And Gabe, going to that first fight, they are still looking for an opponent that is suitable for HBO and Golden Boy purposes for Rocky Juarez. But I think you said it best off the air for Rocky Juarez. If he didn't have bad luck, he wouldn't have
any luck at all. I mean, this poor guy, he's just trying to win his title. He came so close in the first fight. He trained really hard. I heard he had a really good camp coming into this one, and he just really felt that it was his time. And for this to happen, you just can't wonder, you just have to wonder, is this guy ever going to get a break?
This has become the summer of discontent for boxing. Obviously, swine flu is not the only thing that's become a pandemic. A lot of fights from Floyd Mayweather, David Haye, due to, I think, some economically questionable circumstances. And now Chris John, who I have every reason to believe was sick. I don't think it really benefited him in any way to let go of an American televised performance on HBO in a very winnable fight against Rocky Juarez. Unfortunately for the fans in Rocky Juarez, I think now the card does definitely suffer.
Yeah.
Some of the names being thrown out there for Rocky Juarez, I heard Dwight Jordan was brought up. He of Robert Guerrero fame, he is not available. One name that has been brought up by Richard Schaefer is Juan Carlos Salgado, but as of Monday morning, no replacement has been found or approved by HBO and Golden Boy Promotions, which leaves us with the main event, Victor Ortiz versus Marcos Medina. Winner gets a crack at Khan Kotelnik. I think this is a real fight. And watching Medina's fight against Kotelnik several months ago, This is a rough, tough little guy. Victor Ortiz, he's not going to need MapQuest to find him.
No, not at all. But the thing of it is, he's not one of those, kind of unknown, like, Colombian guys that has a big built-up record. Well, he kind of is. But at the same time, when you see him fight, he's got a nice tight guard. He's a pressure guy. He comes forward, but he isn't exactly the easiest guy in the world to hit. He does have, seems to be pretty legit heavy hands. The only big problem is he does tend to telegraph his shots. He telegraphs that right hand, which he's going to need against the southpaw Ortiz. I think it's going to be one of Victor's toughest fights ever, just simply how rough and tumble this guy is. But I think he is going to pull it out.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt. Going into this fight on paper, Victor Ortiz, at 26 fights in, he's been built up. He's been built up like any other prospect. He's been maneuvered. He's been cajoled. He's been kind of jockeyed into position. And now he's being thought of as Golden Boy Promotions' next real big star. And this is a litmus test. But going back to about 2-3 weeks ago, size. Looking at Medina and Ortiz lining up against each other at the press conference, I think here size matters. I think Victor Ortiz is simply too big, too strong, maybe even a little too young.
Yeah, I think Victor Ortiz. I mean, I think they're roughly around the same height, but it's his frame. He's really going to be I think a 147-pounder when all is said and done, and a dominant one. Right now, he looks to be getting close, not to his peak, but he's approaching there. He's on the landing strip. He's heading home, and I really. It kind of reminds me of a young Tito in a sense. His killer instinct, the way he seems to just barely, with his technique, which is so smooth, lay his gloves on you and get all crazy and get knocked out pretty fast. I mean, what he did to Mighty Mike Arnaudis was just kind of amazing. I mean, Mighty Mike may not be the biggest world beater in the world, but to get blown out the way he did by Ortiz was really impressive. I look for this, especially now that he's basically being bumped to the main event. I don't know exactly where HBO is going to put him on the telecast, but now, his fight is really the only legit one on the card, in that he's not going to have a last-minute replacement. This is really his time to shine in Los Angeles, in his hometown. I can't wait to see what he does.
Yeah, I still think this is a very intriguing fight. I just wish that the Juarez-John fight would have stayed on the table. Interesting thing, Golden Boy Promotions believes this guy is a star. I'm not so sure about that quite yet. I believe when this fight was first being discussed, my personal opinion was this fight either belonged at the Home Depot Center in Carson, California, or the Nokia Theater right across the street from the Staples Center. Now, they are cutting off the top bowl, but that is still 11,000 seats you have to fill. Gabe, I'm of the opinion, and philosophically my belief is, Staples Center is the type of arena you go into as a star. I'm not so sure you could build a star, and I've heard some rather mediocre things about the ticket sales going into Saturday.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, to me, one of the best venues, if not my favorite venue in Los Angeles right now, is the Home Depot Center. That little tiny bowl, there's not a bad seat in the house, and really, 5,000 people or 8,000 people if it's sold out, no matter the number, every seat's good, and it always feels like it's sold out. Just the energy in that room is fantastic. I would think that they would build him there just a little bit more. Get him maybe a name opponent fight, and then move him over as, the co-feature to a big fight like Shane Mosley versus Pacquiao or something along those kind of super fight lines. I'm really curious to see how he does in this kind of venue. I'm not sure I agree with putting him right in the Staples Center right now.
So there you have it. This Saturday night, about 3-4 blocks from here at the Los Angeles Staples Center, it's HBO Boxing. We come back, we take a look at Klitschko Chigaya. And we are back on the next round. Steve, Kim, Gabe Montoya talking boxing. This Saturday afternoon in Germany, a heavyweight title tilt took place, and it was once again the steel hammer dropping for the IBF and WBO heavyweight title. Vladimir Klitschko, the TKO in 10 over Ruslan Chigaya. Gabe, I think it's very simple. This guy is the best heavyweight in the world, but that's a whole separate argument from how exciting he is. But it's clear he gets the Ivan Calderon Award for repetitiveness within a fight. You see one round, you've seen them all.
Yeah, there's no argument. Klitschko's pretty boring, but he is the best heavyweight in the world, man. And if you go back, to the Lehman Brewster fight, which is his last loss, he's really kind of learned the lesson. He's really figured out what his strengths are, what his weaknesses are, and how to really use his body, to basically ultimately come up with his style. I mean, he fights very tall. He uses that jab, which is just like a metronome, very repetitive, very steady. He drops in that right hand, and he really uses any other tool that he might need. But if he doesn't need it, he doesn't use it, and he just kind of rinse, repeat, jab, 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 right hand. But, I got a lot of emails this weekend saying, oh, well, Ruslan Chigaya wasn't that good, and, he is who we thought he was. But you look at all the last few fights of Klitschko, and I think he just makes all these guys look that way. They can't get inside of the jab, can't really step around him because he takes one step and it's like everybody else is two steps. I think he's just a very, very difficult style, and what we're seeing is one of the most dominant heavyweight champions we've seen in a while. Sure, the crop's not great, but he's beating them, and he's beating them in very dominant fashion and stopping almost everybody he faces.
Gabe, someone's got to refresh my memory. I don't remember Mike Tyson beating up on a great era of heavyweights. In fact, I remember a lot of cracked-out, coked-up Don King retreads that he beat. And Lennox Lewis certainly did not fight in what I would consider a ultimately very strong era of heavyweight boxing. Ruslan Chagayev can only be judged in this era. And most pundits believe coming into this fight, he was at no worse the third best heavyweight in the world, and perhaps the best heavyweight in the world without the Klitschko surname. The problem with Klitschko is we want our heavyweights to be exciting, we want them to be compelling, we want them to be entertaining. Yeah. He may not be any of that, but he is efficient. And the one thing is, and you talked about his offensive attack, less is more. Because I think in the past, when you have breached his airspace and then you've ultimately closed the distance on his jab, and he's had to fight a little bit, and that chin has been tested, that's when he does fall apart. But in terms of following a game plan from Emmanuel Stewart, I think from a training perspective, if you're Emmanuel Stewart and you know what you have, tall, lean guy with the jackhammer jab, good solid right hand, not exactly the toughest trench fighter in the world, that's exactly the way you want your guy to box.
Yeah, and I think with his size, early on, Klitschko has all the punches. He has like all the punches of say, a welterweight, and he can throw in combination for a guy his size, 6'6" and 250. But I think because of that body type, he would tire out throwing so many punches. And now, they've really pared him down. And more than anything, what I saw in this fight was his patience and his relaxation in the ring. At 33, they always say heavyweights they get better as they age, and I think he's really coming into his own. And he's fighting and taking the best parts of his brother Vitaly's game, and then he fights tall, and his footwork's really nice, and applying them to his straight punches and beautiful technique. I think he's going to be a problem for a long, long time to come.
Gabe, I agree with you. He's an SUV. He does not get great fuel efficiency, but he's absolutely the toughest matchup in the heavyweight division. And you can say what you want about guys like Chagayev, Ray Austin, Sultan Abregimov, wherever else he's fought. Everyone knows what they need to do to beat Klitschko, is to get inside, rough him up, make it a fight. But when you have that long telephone pole jab sticking you in your face, making you look like a Pez dispenser. It's not that easy. There's a reason why guys work around the perimeter, and they kind of make that silent agreement. I'll do just enough to be in the fight, but not nearly enough to win it. Vladimir Klitschko, you could say what you want about him, but he's a very difficult guy to beat. And quite frankly, I don't see anyone out there right now on the horizon that beats Vladimir Klitschko.
No, I think there's you got Alexander Povetkin, who I think is just a better version of Chris Arreola. He's always in shape, but he still throws a lot of punches, not very heavy-handed, but he's got a come-forward style. I think he probably gets stopped late. You've got David Haye, who I still say, and I said before the fight, gets knocked out in 6. He's got a bad chin, unproven power at heavyweight, and throws really wide punches. I just don't see what all the hype was about. Then you've got, Chris Arreola, who's saying he's getting in better shape, is shooting for 240, but is probably going to end up fighting Vitaly Klitschko and getting stopped late. The one guy that I think might have a really good shot is a guy by the name of Alexander Dimitrenko. He trains in the Klitschko camp. He's got nice footwork. He's 6'7", 250, so he's a matchup problem for Klitschko. At least he's equal to him. He's got nice technique, and he's young. He's still learning. I mean, I think if they made it right now, it might look like Lennox Lewis versus Michael Grant, although I think he's a better fighter than Michael Grant. But I give him kind of the best shot right now, just in terms of being a matchup.
Yeah, and Dimitrenko faces Eddie Chambers July 4th, and what I think is a very, very tough matchup, though. I think Chambers' speed and quickness and his mobility and his agility will give Dimitrenko a lot of fits. But I got to say this about Klitschko. You don't have to be a fan because he's not very exciting. But I think you have to appreciate the fact this guy's been steady and he's been consistent. And like a Lennox Lewis or Mike Tyson, you can only judge them by their contemporaries. We don't have time machines here. You can't put them back in 1972. It's kind of like mental masturbation to even talk about what would he do in 1974.
Yeah, I don't really get into the fantasy matchup thing. And you got to, say, as boring as we think he is, somebody was watching. I mean, he did a 58.4% share in Germany. He had 11 million viewers tune into that fight. And you can say that the 61,000 seats that they sold were probably because of David Haye, and that fight sold out very quickly. But 11 million people did tune in. They knew that David Haye wasn't fighting, and they watched. Somebody cares about
Well,
Klitschko.
Let's be honest. David Haye, when he fought Monty Barrett, turned out he only sold 3,000 tickets. So I'll go on the limb and say the majority of tickets were for Dr. Steel Hammer. We come back, we take a look at Latin Fury. Moving on with the next round, Atlantic City, New Jersey. It's another edition of Top Rank's Latin Fury. The main event for the WBO Junior Featherweight title of the world, Juanma Lopez takes on Oliver Lonkti. And then Junior Middleweights in action, Vanes Martirosyan takes on Andre Serkan. And a late addition to this card, Jorge Arce. You want to talk about the summer of discontent. This card on paper, about 6 weeks ago, looked very, very good. As the whiteout is applied, doesn't look so good. But we still get to see a guy that's being kept very, very active by Top Rank. Juanma Lopez, I think, in my opinion, Gabe, is one of the top 3 or 4 young belt holders in the game today.
Oh, yeah. In terms of excitement, in terms of technique and power and just explosiveness, he's got to be up there top 3 easily. I don't think Lonchi really has much of a chance. You can't find any tape on him. I've never really heard of him. For Juanma, the 122 is getting a little thin. He was talking about maybe fighting Israel Vasquez. I don't think that fight's going to happen. Or looking at, Rafael Marquez. I don't think that fight's going to happen. I think the onus is going to be on him to move up in weight to 126, where you got Yuri Gamboa, Stephen Luevano, Bernabe Concepcion, Jorge Solis, and Chris John if he, gets healthy. And Rocky Juarez. You've got a ton of fighters there, and I think that's going to be where we really start to see the best of Juanma.
I think there's one guy at 122 that the fans would clamor for, would be Celestino Caballero, the WBA champion. But that's what we call a fight fans fight, which is a euphemism for saying that 15 people care about it. And I don't think Bob Arum has any real intention of making that fight.
No.
And especially if this particular show here, Latin Fury 9, is successful, well, he becomes, to a certain degree, a much better version of Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. He'll be kept active. They're going to make a lot of money on the islands. And Juanma Lopez, unlike a Miguel Cotto, has an effervescent personality. He's got the Kool-Aid smile, very friendly personality, and he's a puncher. I think he has a chance, despite his size, to be at least the equal in terms of popularity of Miguel Cotto.
I think his style, it spells, transcendent star. I mean, he comes to fight, He looks to either go out on his shield or send you out on yours. He's kind of like a tiny Tito, except that he's a southpaw, and he might actually be a little more versatile than Tito. He can move around a little bit. He's not quite as robotic. But yeah, that effervescent smile, just his energy is a lot different than kind of Miguel Cotto, who's got kind of like a black cloud over him all the time and is not exactly quote-worthy. Juanma's not exactly a quote machine, but he's smiley and he's accessible. And I think that has the makings of a star to me.
Yeah, Juanma Lopez, we don't know enough about his beard yet, has not been really touched by a world-class puncher. If he has that, I think he's one of these guys in these pound-for-pound lists, whatever you make of him. For the next 6 to 7 to 8 years, he will be a mainstay as he moves up from 22 to 26 and to perhaps even 30. Here's a kid that we know very well from being in the local area. Vanes Martirosyan takes on Andrei Serkan. And I've joked with Vanes before because the transition to amateur to professional boxing has been a little bit difficult for him. I've joked to him, don't become the Armenian Yuri Foreman. He's got to start planting his feet, setting his feet, staying in the pocket, and letting his hands go. And I tell you what, Andrei Serkan, you couldn't have asked for a better guy to the Sears catalog. He is built to order to look good, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think they're in a rebuilding process here with Vanes. You can see him in the gym right now. They're kind of he came back from camps with Ronnie Shields, where some of the bloom kind of came off the rose a little bit, if you will. We saw him out here in Anaheim against Billy Lyle. I thought he looked very average. I think he kind of hurt his hand, and he ended up going the distance with Billy Lyle. Who's kind of a trial horse and not really a guy you want to go the distance with. Then he came out and looked really explosive in his last fight against Harrison Coelho, but again, that was a guy that made to order. And I think that Andrei Serkan is kind of a little bit of a step up, but still made to order. I mean, this is a guy that got outboxed by Yuri Foreman, he's had a couple of suspect losses and hasn't really fought in about a year. So Vanes is more of a showcase fight for him, but in a sense, it's also a rebuilding fight as he really kind of finds himself, finds that aggression again, and looks to kind of make a statement in the 154-pound division.
Now, there's a certain pattern with Vanes Martirosyan, though, Gabe. He starts off like a ball of fire, lets his hands go first 2-3 rounds. He's hanging in there. By the 4th round, he's like a quarterback who won't stay in the pocket and gets out of the pocket and just kind of scrambles around, runs out of bounds. I think there comes a point where the light has to turn on, where Vanes starts to look like a real pro, where he sets his feet, and he throws combinations, and he hangs in there for all 10 rounds. Andrei Serkan, to me, is built to order. He's a slow, plodding guy. You see where his punches are coming from. He's a heavy-handed guy, but I wouldn't call him a puncher. If he can't succeed and shine against Andrei Serkan, I think there are some very, very acute questions that need to be asked about the future of Vanes Martirosyan. Well, that's it for this segment. When we come back, we wrap it up with news and notes. Moving on with the next round, we take a look at news and notes. We go to the fight review on Versus. Jean Pascal, the 12-round decision over Adrian Diacono. Then on ESPN2, Fernando Beltran with a 12-round decision over Monty Meza Clay. Then in Mexico, Saturday night for the WBC light flyweight title, Edgar Sosa, TKO in 5 over Carlos Melo. Gabe, we always talk about losses that benefit fighters and guys who get better from drowning out into the ocean. Well, Jean Pascal was in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. He started to kind of bob and started to weave. The water started to get up on him. But you know what? That experience that he had, that first loss with Carl Froch, I thought some of the same things were happening. This time, though, he found a way to keep his head above water, and I think that experience served him well, as I thought he earned a hard-earned decision over Adrian Diacono.
What a hell of a fight! I mean, I was very surprised by Pascal. I didn't think he had the toughness. I mean, he'd had that war with Froch, and it was impressive. But I thought that he would break when he started to bend. And Diacono is that kind of slow-moving train. He got dropped early. And then he came back and he really hurt Pascal. But Pascal righted the ship and despite all his bad technique and jumping straight back with his hands down or kind of lunging with punches, he was really effective, and I thought his speed was the difference. And then ultimately his toughness and his mental fortitude was the difference. I was really impressed.
Speed, toughness, and I also believe the ability to offset Diacono. And I thought Diacono made a terrible strategic mistake, and I don't know what was going on in the corner. Adrian Diacono needed to take the legs away from Pascal. And the way you do that, you got to go downstairs. You got to keep hitting that left hook. And I thought he had opportunities to grind on the inside, and he just kind of got there, and then he clinched. And I thought he did all that work for nothing. And from the outside, Jean Pascal's fast hands and his power really troubled Diacono. Taking a look at Fernando Beltran, I don't know if he's a world-class junior featherweight. I'll say one thing, though. He is a hard-nosed grinder. This guy makes for pretty good TV.
Yeah, he makes for very good TV, but yeah, I would say he's not going to be a world champion. He's not a world beater. But every time out, you can get a war. I mean, I was at once impressed by his performance because it was tough and it was hard fought. But at the same time, he went kind of life and death with Money Clay,
Yes.
who's kind of a trial horse. Is not the guy that you want to go life and death with. So, I mean, I think ultimately he'll be built up and then kind of fed to somebody that's more of a blue chip prospect or a contender.
Taking a look at the fight preview Saturday night in Germany, and yes, this is on Showtime. IBF middleweight champion Arthur Abraham takes on Mahir Oral. Then in Mexico for the WBA junior lightweight title, Jorge Linares takes on Josafat Perez. Arthur Abraham, I'll say this, he's kept busy, but I think to me there's going to be an unwritten destiny if Abraham and Pavlik do not fight very soon here at 160.
It's really hard to tell who doesn't want to fight who. Just this last couple weeks, Pavlik started kind of laying out a two-fight plan, and neither of those two fights involved Arthur Abraham. I mean, last year we were hearing that this fight might happen, and I just wonder what's going on with Kelly Pavlik that he would throw those two fights out and not even mention Abraham. I know Abraham wants the fight, but at some point maybe he's going to have to come over here, where he's going to have to kind of force the situation if he really wants to win. Because I agree with you, it's almost going to be like Roy Jones, Darius Michalczewski in a sense, where you had the two guys that were clearly the number one and number two in the division. One guy was in Germany, one guy was here, and neither guy wanted to meet in the middle.
I think one of the things that we're going to have to look for is Arthur Abraham, from what I'm told, is having a lot of problems making 160.
Yeah.
So by the time they get together, it may not even be a middleweight title fight. Now, at that point, it loses a lot of its luster. Gabe, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Jorge Linares is a gifted young prize fighter who's absolutely disappeared. I think it's time. I know he's young, but you know what they say? Youth is wasted on the young. Jorge Linares, in my opinion, should already be a guy talked about like a Juan Ma Lopez. I don't know what's going on with Taken. I don't know what's going on with his management situation. But you would hope after Josafat Perez, they stop screwing around, get him an American promoter, and let him start facing some of the best fighters in the world on bigger platforms.
Yeah, he's like the best fighter in the world that you've never seen. He's always a pleasure to watch. He's always all action. I mean, he's everything you kind of want in a fighter. He's must-see TV. And he's fighting this Josafat Perez guy who I've, once again, never heard of. I don't really know what the story is, but, at junior lightweight, there's a lot of guys to fight, and there's a lot of room for him to become a star. Moving from 130 into 135. I mean, I'd love to see him versus, say, like an Edwin Valero as he moves up in weight. And yet, we're not really going to get to see that because Tican just seems to be happy to just kind of feed him, guys that he can beat and make their little bit of money, and the rest of us kind of suffer.
The buzz on Linares was extremely high after he beat Oscar Larios in July of 2007. And you said to yourself, this guy's going to take off like a rocket ship.
Yeah.
Houston, we have a problem because it absolutely has not happened. He's absolutely stalled, but I think it's time. This guy is way too good to become this Japanese guy that's kind of hidden out there. I think he has star potential. He has the look, and I know there's interest from American promoters. I think they got to get going. I think Linares is going to be an absolute force.
Yeah, I think he can not only be a force, but something of a star. I mean, it just baffles me. I've been watching him for a long time, and you got to watch him on a Japanese feed or get a download from a friend. And
Gabe, isn't it amazing? Edwin Valero is basically banned in 49 jurisdictions in this country from fighting, yet he's actually making a name for himself, and one of the reasons they signed with Top Rank. So I think Linares has some decisions to make as for where his career goes. Well, that's it for this week's edition of TNR on behalf of Gabriel Montoya and the rest of Max Boxing. To the next round, goodbye, everybody.